basically blacked out. And when I like opened my eyes, so to speak, I was in this like giant field.
Hello, and welcome to Spirit Travels, where we narrate the extraordinary experiences of people who have glimpsed the other side of death. My name is Maureen, and I will be your narrator on this journey. If you enjoy this content, please make sure to like and subscribe to support our channel. Now let's begin.
Hi, everybody. This is Maureen. I am here again with another episode of Spirit Travels, and we have another fantastic guest today. Her name is Rachel, and I actually came across her on TikTok. And yeah, her videos are really great. I'm going to let her introduce herself and tell you about her experience.
Hi, my name is Rachel, and my TikTok kind of like blew up from my near-death experience that I had in college. I think it was like back in 2011 or 10. The time has slipped for me, so bear with me. I've been married for 10 years to my loving, amazing partner, and I have learned a lot from this near-death experience, and I have a really cool privilege of getting to do interviews with people like Maureen and a plethora of other interviews that I've done. And I get a lot of really cool emails and social media messages about like different things that I have helped other people process through like personal death or like their own personal fear of passing over. So it's a really interesting process, to say the least.
Yeah, I can imagine that's like it's a topic that everyone wants to know about because it's something we're all going to have to face.
Yep, it's a universal experience, that's for sure.
100%. Yeah. So, let us know, like, what happened? How did you pass away and what did you experience?
So one of the things that I like preference with any interview that I do is I think there's like this social stigma around like suicide and mental health issues and things of that nature. And myself being a survivor, I think people think like, well, they were totally fine, and then all of a sudden, like, boom, they were gone. Like they left a note or they didn't, and things of that nature. And I think what people don't fully understand with suicide and people that struggle with mental health is that it's not just one key pivotal moment in someone's life where they just kind of like flip the switch and they're like, that's it, I don't want to either deal with this anymore, or that was too much, or so on and so forth. Like there are events that happen throughout someone's life that lead them to this like cataclysmic moment where they're like, that's like the straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak. And so for myself, like I had a really hard childhood growing up. My dad and I had a really tumultuous relationship. I felt like anything that I did or said just wasn't like good enough for him. And my mom had cancer when I was in high school, and she was like my main support quite frequently in my life. And then I was sexually assaulted by two high school classmates of mine. And then I went off to college, and I never truly dealt with that. You know, I graduated in 2009 from high school. And so when I went into high school in 2004, like mental health wasn't a thing. It wasn't openly discussed. There was no such thing as like you go to your guidance counselor, you tell them you're depressed, and then they help you find treatment. There was nothing like that when I was in high school. You didn't talk about your feelings. And I'm from the Midwest, and there was like, it was not okay to be gay. Matthew Shepard was like a huge thing back then. He was like, he was killed for being gay. And I remember me and a few other of my classmates wore tie-dye to his like anniversary of his like murder. And the principal came through, and anyone that had anything that resembled tie-dye, rainbow pride, or anything, we got sent home for the day. It was just a totally different demographic than what it is now. And it's a good turn that society is trying to make, because I think if there was more resources for people like me and my friends, I don't know if I would have felt the way that I did about myself. So that's kind of like the starting point of like my view of myself and why I felt like I needed to do what I did, because there was no resources. It wasn't really spoken about to be gay, and that was okay and everything else. So I had a really bad self-image. I just wasn't okay with myself. I wasn't okay with like being gay, so to speak. And then I went off to college and I dated this guy. He was just not good for me, and I wasn't good for him. We were bad for each other. And he introduced me to a variety of different like drugs and substances and things of that nature, which, you know, I feel like when you're depressed and you're not okay with yourself, and like you don't have like that support, or you feel like you don't have that support to have that conversation with people, it's easy for you to want to numb yourself out, which is exactly what I did. I just decided like this is a lot easier than dealing with my emotions, and it's a lot easier than wanting to deal with whatever I'm trying to mask. So I started doing like, started off with smoking weed, and then it was going to parties and like, oh, hey, like I do this, that whole thing. And then before I knew it, like, I also had a prescription for like Xanax, because I was so anxious and I had so much depression, and I was just like really not okay mentally. And before I knew it, I was taking like 3 or 4 Xanax in the morning to like function, to like make it through class. And then I was taking 2 or 3 in the evening to like relax, to get my homework done, or relax to make it to my evening class. So by the time like, I realized what was happening, it was too late, because I was taking like 10 to 11 pills a day to function, to like mask whatever I was going on with myself. And I think that's what kind of led me up to that point, because the guy that I was dating, like we just weren't good for each other, and we got into this like altercation. He was like really irritated with me because like I went out with our group of friends, but he was really controlling and just like not a good partner to have. And he like, I had came out to him that I was like bisexual. I feel like that's like a safe stepping stone for some people, like, because you can kind of go back and forth with what you're comfortable with in the moment. And so for myself, I was like, I was bi, is what I identified as in the moment. And then I feel like that just kind of like kicked him off. Like he was just like, you can't hang out with so-and-so. You can't go there unless if I'm with you. And, me coming from like an abusive family upbringing with a male figure that was controlling, that was what I was used to. And then he got really mad at me one night for something. I don't even remember what happened, but he got really mad at me, and I invited my friends over. We all went out on campus to go like watch a movie on a projector. And then when we came back, he was angry that I was hanging out with our friend group without him. And he got in this huge like rage. He just started throwing things and screaming at me. And my friends were like, we're going to go. We're really sorry we caused this. I was like, it's fine. Not a problem. So he was like flying off the handle, like losing his temper. And I didn't know what to do. And he looked at me and he said, you know why people want to be friends with you is because you dress like a slut, essentially. And, that was what my dad told me when I was sexually assaulted. He got really angry. And I think he's just one of those people that like, he can't regulate his emotion. He's either happy or angry. Like there's no in between. And I think he just got so scared and so upset. He just word vomited to his own daughter. But that stuck with me, and it like sent me into this like PTSD tunnel. And I was just like, like I don't need this. I'm going to go. And I had a room on campus. So I would go back to my dorm when me and him were like not okay with each other. And I don't know if that was just like my tipping point, or if that was like the last straw for me, essentially. And then I just went to my dorm and I was like, I think maybe this is all my life is going to be, is just like people getting angry at me, and they're not ever going to be okay with me. And that's just kind of when I like mentally snapped a little bit. And I had just gotten a refill of my Xanax for 90 days. And I took pretty much every single one of them. And I also had high blood pressure medication at the time that I was taking, because my blood pressure was through the roof because I was so anxious and had so much anxiety at the time. And it just was like I don't want to say like a knee jerk reaction, but it was an impulse that I had. And I just took everything pretty much that I had. And then I just kind of started to like go in and out of it. Like, I don't really remember much after that. But apparently, one of the girls that was a friend of mine, she went to go check on me because I wasn't answering my phone. I wasn't answering my text messages. And so she had come over to check on me. And she was knocking on the door pretty hard. I was apparently passed out. I don't remember her knocking on the door. But I don't know. How old are you? Like, if you don't mind me asking.
I am 38.
Okay, great. So you're like close to my age. Okay, so like, do you remember when Netflix would send you DVDs?
Yes.
Like, okay, great. So that's how old I am. Okay. And I remember that I had ordered DVDs from Netflix and I had put one in, and apparently I either like face planted it on the laptop or like, I don't know, but the laptop was really loud and she could hear my Netflix playing. And then she went to go get an RA. She's like, hey, my friend and her boyfriend got into an argument. Like, I don't know if she's okay. We should probably like check on her.
Yeah.
And then they had to wait for the police to arrive because legally they cannot get into your dorm without police present. So the last thing that I remember, I don't remember seeing it, but I remember hearing it, was they must have got paramedics because the last thing I remember was this paramedic telling me, you're really not going to like me if I have to shove this tube down your throat. And they were trying to get me to drink a charcoal beverage to absorb the toxins out of my system. But that's the last thing I remember. And then that's where my like near-death experience started.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. I'm first of all, I'm really sorry that you experienced all that. That's awful. Nobody should make anyone feel like that. I'm really sorry about that.
You know, like, I think everything happens for a reason. And I needed to experience that for myself personally because I was going down this like really awful trail in my life. And I was like surrounding myself with people that I was trying to get validation for in other places. Like, this ex-boyfriend that I had reminded me so much of my biological father. And I think I was trying to get validation for that relationship through him in some weird way. And I mean, I'm glad that I had people in my life that cared enough about me to come check on me, because I don't think if she had come to check on me, like, I probably wouldn't be here doing these interviews with people. Yeah. So everything happens for a reason. So
yeah, absolutely. So tell us about what happened once you crossed over.
Yeah. So the next thing, I like basically blacked out, and when I like opened my eyes, so to speak, I was in this like giant field, and it's so surreal because like people ask me all the time, like, well, how big was it? And it's, you know, what did it look like? And the best way that I can describe is if you're standing on the edge of the ocean and there's no landmarks, so there's like no rocks in front of you, it's just pure ocean. You get a sense of like perspective through the gradient in the sky. So like you can see kind of a little bit of like curvature of the earth and the way that the color goes from like light to dark. In this space, there was no gradient in the sky. It was just this like serene, almost like picturesque, like neon blue. Like, I've never seen a color like it back here, as like cliche as that sounds. I've never seen a color like it on Earth, and I don't think I'll ever see it again until it's officially my time to go. And I remember being like, holy cow, this place is huge. And to the side of me was like this little body of water. I wouldn't say little, but it was a body of water. And all around me were like flowers. And they were like these stunning shades of like neon purpley yellow flowers, and then some of them were like almost like true gold marigold, like they glistened like gold. It was really weird. And I was just like, this is so, and it felt real. Like it wasn't like where you're having like a trip and you're like, ooh, this is kind of weird. You know that you're like having like a weird psychedelic experience. This was like, I'm breathing it, I can hear it, I can feel it. It's not like something that I have ingested to make me think this is happening. Like this is truly happening. And then directly in front of me was like this massive tree. The only way that I can explain it, like size wise, is the movie Avatar. So like how small the people were comparison to the tree is how I felt.
Wow.
So I'm like looking around and I'm like not really like, people always ask me if I was like greeted by family members when I passed or went wherever I was going. And no, because my entire family was still alive. But there was no one else in this space. It was just me in this tree in like nature, essentially. And like, I'm standing there and I'm kind of taking in my surroundings. I'm looking at all the flowers and everything. And then this voice comes from like everywhere. So like not in front of me, not to the side, not behind me. It was like enveloping me as it was like speaking. And it sounded like, have you ever been to like a concert and everyone in the concert is singing in unison?
Yes.
Great, perfect. So that's what it felt like, but it was like amplified probably like 100 times. It sounded like millions of people talking in the same tone. There was like no hangovers of like enunciations. Everything was crisp and clean. And it was really weird. It was like, it was eerie, but it was comforting. You know what I mean? Like, it's like I have known this voice before, as weird as that sounds. And it asked me in a nutshell, like, ask the questions you want to gain knowledge to. And I was so I had been told my whole life, like I was a problem and I was this and that. And I felt really bad about myself. Like I had a bad self-image. And I asked, I don't know if it was out loud or in my mind. I've been asked that and I don't know. What does it take to be a good person? And it was so weird. It was like all this information was like crammed in my brain telepathically. I had not been very nice to a classmate. She had asked me a question or for help and I snapped at her. I was just like not in a good headspace. And I got to see my interaction through like my eyes now, like how I'm talking to you. And then within the same instance, like I'm seeing how I'm talking to her, but then I'm also seeing how she is perceiving me. Like I am feeling her emotion. I am feeling her upset. I am feeling her confusion. I am seeing how horrible I was being to her. I could feel all of the negativity that I was like pushing into her through my interaction at the same time. It was so weird. But then I got to experience how she carried my negative conversation I had with her, and she took it with her and it interacted with 7 different people. And I got to experience it through their eyes and how they carried it and pushed it down like the conga line, essentially. And it's like, it was like this ripple effect of negativity that I personally created and how it just affected 7 different people from one choice that I made.
Wow.
And then and like literally the next lesson that I saw was if I had treated her nicely, how that in turn affected her in the same manner that I saw myself interacting with her and vice versa with her view and with others. And it was just like this beautiful like chain. Like I felt like the negativity shift and I felt like how pleasant and peaceful she felt throughout the rest of the day, including those 7 other people. And I was like instantly like slapped back into my body in front of this tree. And you know how sometimes like someone will try to explain something to you and there's like parts of your brain that you're just like, I don't get this at all. This makes no sense. I had no question. It was like my brain was fed the information. I instantly understood it. I didn't have any questions. It was done. And I instantly grasped every single ounce of the concept that they were pushing into me. And I was like, it was so weird. I was like, holy shit, this is crazy. And then, you know, like devil's advocate, me being a curious critter, I guess, I was like, well, what does it take to be a bad person? Like, what happens if you're a bad person? And the minute the last syllable left my lips, like, was gone, I was instantly enveloped from like toes to head in this black shadow pit issue thing. And I was completely naked in this space. And the people will ask, well, what was it like? We've all been like deeply asleep and you're jolted awake from like your dog throwing up on the floor, or something hits the floor, your cat, or you have like a bad dream and it instantly wakes you up.
Yeah.
That black sleep, the deep sleep that we all kind of like vaguely remember, is how dark this place was. It was very intense. It was very dark, and it wasn't like, it was kind of cold, but it was also kind of like just blah. Like it was an indifferent space. And the best way that I can describe how it felt was like your deepest part of depression. Like when you're super depressed and nothing just seems to make you feel good, like you're just kind of like on autopilot going through the day. That's what this place was like. I didn't feel anything. I wasn't cold. I wasn't hot. I wasn't upset. I wasn't happy. It was just kind of here. And then when I was looking at myself, I was like this really weird, funky shade of gray. Like I haven't seen it in anything else on Earth, so to speak. And I was surrounded by like hundreds of thousands of people that we were all the same shade of gray. There was no race. I couldn't see if they were white or African American or like anything. We were all this weird, funky shade of gray. And I could look at them and I could hear them, but I couldn't talk to them. Like you are just in the space and it's almost like you're trying to talk to each other, but you physically can't. And we're all naked, and it wasn't like weird. Like we weren't like trying to cover up or like avert our eyes or anything. Like we just understood like this is what it is. And it wasn't like I felt super uncomfortable that I knew I was naked and other people were looking at me. It wasn't anything of that nature. And then I remember I looked down and there was like a little kid in front of me. Like he was probably like 5 or 6. And he was like this shade of gray. And he went to go open his mouth and nothing came out. It was like he was trying to scream and I couldn't hear him. And he had no color in his iris or his pupils. They were just black. And it was like, it was really, I still kind of like sometimes get nightmares about that kid because it was like
freaky.
Like it's really weird. It was really weird. And so like I just and then the next thing I remember is that I'm awake and I'm in the hospital with my mom. I kind of like came to, and I remember my mom was sitting at the edge of my hospital bed, and it was like really, like things were kind of shifting around. Like I was really like on probably the worst bender of my life. I did not feel good. I was like, oh my God, this sucks so bad. I remember sitting at the edge of on the bed, my mom's sitting at the edge. I'm like hooked up to all these machines and everything. And I look at my mom and I'm like, what are you doing here? And she was like, she was she was upset. She wasn't angry, but like, we all know how moms get like,
like disappointed.
Yeah. She was like, what the heck? And I remember I was looking past her and I said, oh, Dad and Jonathan, my brother, are here. And she just kind of like gave me a look and she's like, no, they're not. They're not here. And I said, yeah, they are. They're in the doorway. I can see them right now. Like, I can see them. And she kind of like looked over her shoulder and she got really stern. and she got like really upset, and she said, no one is here but me. And then I realized when I looked at them a little longer, they were shadow people. They were like black figures in the doorway. And that really freaked me out. And I guess like I started to freak out, and the nurses came in and gave me some medication. I don't know. But then apparently, like, I don't know how long I was out for. I've heard it was like a week and a half. I don't know. I do not remember. It's like if you've ever like had way too much to drink and you just kind of like, I don't say blackout, but you lose track of time is a nice way to say that. That's exactly what it was like. I was gone for like a week. And then the next time I woke up, I was in a rehab facility. I guess my parents tried to take me home, and I was communicating with a friend of mine. And I guess I don't remember this. I guess I was like texting her, like, you know, like, hey, I died and I saw this and that. And, you know, like I wasn't making sense. And I guess I was saying things that scared her. So she called my brother, and my brother woke up my parents, and they sent me off to a rehab facility to get evaluated and to get help. And then that's kind of where it kind of all starts to come together, because I was talking to the psychiatrist that I had. I won't say her name just in case I don't want to get her in trouble. But she did an interview with me and was talking about what I was experiencing, and I was telling her everything that I'm telling you now. And she stopped me like mid-sentence, and she said, if you're okay with it, I want to record our conversation for scientific purposes. I was like, yeah, that's totally fine. So she goes and she opens up a closet, and there's like a filing cabinet in the closet, and she goes to the very back and she pulls out a manila envelope with a recorder, and she's like, start all the way over from everything that we just talked about until right now. And she's like, tells me to wait, and she's like, this is Rachel, this is Case, whatever, blah, blah, blah. And she's like, you can begin telling me about your experience. I go through the whole thing. She shuts it off, and she's like, how do you feel? I was like, you know, I feel kind of weird. Like, can I ask what this is for? And she said, do you see this filing cabinet over here? I was like, yeah. And she's like, that top shelf is full of people that have had near-death experiences like you, and they are all eerily similar, but they're slightly tweaked. We don't know why. Science is just now starting to understand this, but I'm doing case studies on it, and you all have very similar stories, slightly different, but they're like geared towards you in the moment, like what you need right now. And it was like really eye-opening. I was like, oh, that's really crazy. So
Yeah.
it kind of gave me a little bit of like solitude, knowing that like I hadn't been through this by myself in a way. Like other people have experienced it as well.
Yeah. A lot of people. Yeah. Your experience has a lot of corroborated elements with a lot of other experiences that I've heard.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's this one, I was watching this UK show the other day on Netflix or something, and this lady had a near-death experience, and she talked about the field in the same way that I did, and it instantly gave me goosebumps, and I like had to turn it off. I was like, this is too much for me to watch.
Yeah.
I got about halfway through her episode, and everything that she was talking about, like the voice and the flowers and this like little body of water, and I was like, ooh,
Yep.
that's a little too much for me. So I like
Yep.
turned it off, but then, you know, my wife came home, and I was like, hey, like, I think I could get through this, like, if we watched it together. And she's like, oh yeah. And she's like, the whole time she's watching it, she just keeps like side-eyeing me, like, are you okay? I'm like, I'm fine. Like, this is so weird. I was like, I know. She's like, have you ever met this lady? I was like, nope. She's like, oh.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually a really crazy because when I started like researching NDEs, I was really curious to see if maybe they were similar because people all came from like the same kind of background or the same country. But then I started looking at non-Western NDEs, and they still have a lot of the same elements. So
Yes.
that to me validates, you know, the experiences and the experiencers. And like, it's really cool to see that so many people see these similar elements no matter where they're from.
It's really weird, you know, like, ever since I've done these interviews, I think you're like number 7 or something. Ever since I've done these, I'm getting like emails and Facebook messages and Instagram messages from people that have either had a near-death experience or they're interested in it, or a family member of them has had it. And they all kind of communicate with me like, hey, like I experienced this personally, and I saw you did too. Like, did this location have like this, and this? And I'm like, yeah. They're like, oh my God, we were at the same place. And it's just kind of, it's wild to me.
Yeah,
Like,
that's incredible.
this universal experience that we all have as human beings, and we won't know about it until it's our time, essentially.
Mhm.
And that's like, I feel like I'm the prime example of that, like you're not going to go until it's your time, regardless of what you try or do or anything, and I think to a certain extent, like, it makes me nervous sometimes doing these, because I don't want people to get like the idea of like, well, that's all I needed to hear. And that kind of makes their mind up in a way. Like, thank God I haven't had any of those interactions. And it always makes me nervous, like doing these interviews and talking about my experience, because I don't want it to like persuade someone to go one way or another. And, I always want to preface this, like, it is your time when it's your time, and you can't rush it, because I'm a prime example of that, because you will come back way different than you ever went in.
Yeah, no, that's a great point, right? Like, it's a great place, but you don't want to go there before you're supposed to, right? Like,
Yeah.
you won't be able to, even if you tried, is what you're saying.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. You don't
Yeah,
want to,
totally get that.
yeah, you don't want to force it, because like, I feel like the repercussions for me, like going and then coming back, like, I'll never forget. So like I was at this like mental health facility, and this poor woman was doing my intake, and I was out of it. I was not 100% myself just yet. And she looked at me, and generic intake questions like, what's your date of birth, like blah blah blah. But she started with like, well, how old are you? Probably trying to like entice me to talk to her. And I genuinely looked at her and I said, I don't know. And she's like, well, what do you mean? I was like, well, my birthday is 1990. So what year is it? Like, I felt like I had aged so dramatically
Wow.
while I was there. Like, the field went by really quick. Like, I felt like that was like maybe like a couple hours of my life, my soul life, so to say. But like, when I came back from the pit, like, I felt really old, and I felt like my soul had aged significantly. And it's kind of weird to think of it that way, but like when I came back, I just felt exhausted. I felt tired, like spiritually. I was so like tapped out, is a nice way to put it.
Wow.
And then when I came back, and she was like, well, sweetie, you're like 20, you're 19, 20 years old. I was just like, oh, okay. Well, that doesn't make sense to me. And she's like, well, what do you mean? I was like, I don't know. I couldn't explain it to her,
Wow.
of time, but it was just kind of weird, and I felt like even now, like, I'm 32, and there are some people that are my age, and they get like riled up over certain things, like they get super anxious and angsty and this and that. And I feel like, I'm like, everything's temporary. Nothing is forever, quite including us. Like, we will eventually all go somewhere that's way better and bigger than what we ever could have imagined. And, as a human being, you just got to ride it out. And people are like, yeah, but I'm mad about it. I was like, who cares? But like, let me live my emotion right now. Let me process through that. And I think to a certain extent, like, some things bother me and then some things don't. And I try really hard to like not get wrapped up in trivial things. But of course, I'm human. I'm going to make mistakes. I'm going to learn. I'm not like Gandhi or anything of that nature.
None of us are. So-
I feel like that would be a lot of like stress on yourself to be someone that's like that,
I'm
like,
sure it is. Yeah, it can't be easy. Otherwise, we'd all do it. But yeah.
true. So, I feel like this sounds really silly, but like, a lot of people that I like hang out with are significantly older than me, because I feel like I can't relate to people my age. Like, I have a hard time relating to folks that are like my age, maybe a little bit younger, in the sense of like life things, because, like, I've seen a lot of death. Like, both my parents had cancer, and, I was sexually assaulted, and, you know, things that I think people my age get wrapped up in don't bother me quite as much because I've seen a bigger picture than a lot of people would have to see in their entire lifetime.
Yeah.
So it's just kind of like one of those weird little goofy things. Like, yes, I was enlightened, so to speak, but then it ruined my social circle.
I get it. I get it. But I think what it is you've now gained the perspective of what's futile and what's not.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think that's a big thing.
Yeah.
I have some questions for you if that's okay.
Yeah. Oh God.
So
Yeah,
some
please.
stuff you kind of touched on already, but I'm just gonna like dig a little bit deeper. So one thing my question is, did you have a physical body? Like, how did you experience or see or feel, or like, did you smell things? Yeah. How did you experience things?
Well, so like in the field, in this like really cool, like magical place that I was at, I felt like grass and I could like feel a breeze a little bit, but like I didn't hear anything besides the voice. Like people ask me a lot, like, did you hear birds? And did you hear this? And did you hear that? And not to like go too far off subject, but my grandfather, who was like my best friend in the whole wide world, he passed away like 5 or 6 years ago. He had a daughter named Erica, and she died of leukemia. And he was really open about death. Like he had 5 children in his lifetime, and out of the 5, 3 of them passed away. And he just like he lived a really hard life. He came from like the depression, so he literally was like pick yourself up by the bootstraps, but he was gentle. He wasn't like a domineering presence whatsoever. He was very nurturing, very kind, very loving. And when his daughter, she was diagnosed with leukemia, and this is before like St. Jude was ever created. And she started her body started to shut down from the cancer. And he told me that she started to pass away in the evening, like in the evening hours. So it was dark outside. And he said, I was holding her while she was passing, and her eyes got very wide, and she looked at the window and she said, do you hear the birds, Dad? Do you hear the birds, Daddy? And he said, his wife, my grandmother Tootsie, just kind of was like shook her head, and he like tapped her, and he said, I hear them. And he said, you can go to them. And she was, oh, okay. And then she died. So like he was really open about that when I was growing up, and I never heard birds when I was in the field. I never heard birds. I never heard animals. I never really smelt anything truly, but I like could hear the voice, and I could feel it vibrationally through my entire being, essentially. Like, I know that sounds really cliche, but I could feel it like vibrating within myself, and I was connected to this like all-knowing voice, so to speak. Wow. And it was weird. And I could feel the grass, I could hear the water like moving, like the ripples and things of that nature. And I could hear like the leaves of the tree swaying, but I never smelt anything. I never heard like birds or animals, or I never saw other people. It was just me in this space. And it was my physical body. Like I remember being there and kind of like experiencing these like life lessons of how I spoke to my classmates. And I could see myself, how I looked. I could see her and how I was communicating with her. And then 7 strangers that I have never seen. And I was in their body experiencing their emotions, and how my interaction with one person had this ripple effect on seven different people. And I got to experience that. So yes, I do say I was in my body in a way.
Wow. No, that's really cool. I mean, I'm sure it's like hard to like compare because it's not a material body the way we have it now, right?
Exactly. And I feel like I don't want to sound like really cliche, because like, I don't want to come off as like poetic or anything, but like how, like, I want to call it a vessel is a nice way. Like our body is a shell. It's a vessel for something that is so much more grandiose than what we can ever fathom with our cognitive human abilities. And I feel like when I was experiencing these, I got to see people's souls and how beautiful they are and how they felt on the inside, and how ugly I made them by behaving the way that I actively chose to. And it like changed me in the way that I look at people, like, yes, like you're a different skin tone than me, or yes, you're missing a limb, or yes, you're like wheelchair bound, or you're nonverbal. But there's this like beautiful essence that we can never understand until it is our time to go. And I wish people could I wish there was a way that I could like just give like an ounce of like what I experienced, because I think it would change the way people see themselves and how they love themselves. Because for myself, I was really hard on the way I looked. I felt like I was never good enough. And then when I had this near death experience, I realized like this body gets me from point A to point B. And the only job that this body is supposed to have is to house the creature, the being, the soul, inside, to have me experience life and to help me nurture other people to experience the beautiful parts of their own souls in their own way. It's a nice way to put it.
Wow, that's deep. It's awesome. It's a lot to like process as like a human person who's going through the motions like, day to day.
And I think, like this experience, like I hate to sound like absolutely cliche, but like I feel like the way that this has happened to me, I feel like I just can't not live the way that I used to, like I can't just look at somebody and go, Jesus, what is she wearing? You know what I mean? Like I can't, because we've been there, we've all done it, myself included, like, oh my God, what is she wearing? Holy Jesus. But now that I have had this experience, I feel like I look at people, you included, and I see much more than a physical body. I see much more than a smile or like a laugh or an article of clothing that you're wearing. Like I get to see, like I'm experiencing life experiences with you in the same mannerism. And, if I can just at least go in and like say, hey, you know what, like I experienced this and things are going to be okay. Like you're beautiful. Your soul is beautiful and you're going to be just fine. Like, I know that sounds really silly and like culty, but it's honestly the only way that I feel like I can truly communicate with people anymore is like through passion and love. Because if I don't, like, why did I have this amazing experience to where I can help change and shape things for other people, and I choose actively to do nothing with it? Like that's a bad choice on my end, and that lesson was for nothing, essentially.
So would you say that is the lesson that you learned? Because that would be one of the questions. So like what would you say you've learned from this or take away? Would you say that's what the lesson is?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like, so my lesson for me was like, I was so wrapped up in what other people thought of me. Like I was so wrapped up in what, like, you're a bad person, you're going to hell because you're gay, like you're this and you're that. And I had taken all of this input from other people and shaped a mold of myself and how I interpreted my own self, regardless of what I thought of me. And I think for myself, like me being able to look at someone and say, hey, you know what? Like you did the best thing that you knew how in your moment with your life experience and with your passion that you have right now. What is something that you can utilize in the future to shift that experience into something more positive? It didn't turn out exactly the way that you had intended. What are you going to do in the future to help you grow and not make the same mistake again? And I think for myself, like that was the biggest thing, was how can I love myself and other people the way that I would want to be treated? Like I wasn't given the love that I wanted from my biological father. Like we're better now. Like we have a better relationship. We have a better relationship now than we've probably ever had in my entire life. And I just think for me, it was like, if I can't get the love that I'm needing from someone else, I'm not going to go seek it elsewhere. I'm going to find it within myself. And if that means that I have to learn how to love myself from the ugliest portions all the way up to the best parts of myself, that's the way that I just need to live my life from then on out. and I've chosen that actively. I try really hard every day. Now I am human and I make mistakes. Like some days I wake up on the wrong side of the bed. Like everyone does that.
All of us, yeah.
So I'm not Gandhi by any means necessary. But I feel like there are some things in life that I try really hard to be like compassionate about and understanding, because if someone had given me that ounce of gratitude, or like,
Passion.
yeah, hey, you're struggling, what can I help you with? Like, what's going on? Do you need somebody to talk to? Like that would have literally changed my life drastically, and I never received it. And I feel like if that's all it takes is to help someone else go from here to here, I'll try it any day. I may not know you, but I'll try to get to know you to help you.
Yeah, I think, I mean, I think also when you were talking about how you were able to actually experience not just, events from your own perspective, but from the other person's perspective simultaneously, like that's huge, right? Because I feel like, I don't know, I feel like in our society, a lot of it is we don't do that. We're always like kind of like thinking about our perspective, and it's really hard for us to have that kind of like outsider.
Yeah,
Way
to
of thinking,
take
yeah.
like a step back and realize like there are two people here. Like
Yeah.
I had a professor in college, she was like, perception is reality. And I was like, and this was a lesson that she taught me way before I had my experience, and I never understood it. Like I was just like, perception is reality. And she's like, so like you and I have the same conversation, you think you're right, but I think I'm right, who's right? And I was like, shit, And then I had this moment, I had this experience, and I was like, I got to experience how my actions as an individual went out and like almost like ripple affected out into the world, essentially.
Yeah.
And how if I actively chose to be a jerk, and if I actively chose to, knowing that I was saying something because I was angry and it was going to make me feel better but make you feel bad, I chose to actively do that instead of taking a step back and being like, hey, I need to like take a minute. Can we come back to this in a few minutes just so I have time to collect what I want to say, instead of like word vomiting all over you. I think people don't understand. I think you're absolutely correct. People don't have empathy to see perspective. That is lacking in our society because, we've got these. I would rather have an interaction with a rectangle, that's a shiny box, than look at you and say, hey, like, how's your day?
Yeah.
You look a little do you want to talk about it? Like,
Yeah.
and I
And
think it's so weird for society now anymore to have that
totally.
genuine compassion for another human being. Like, hey, last week you had a rough day. Are you cool with that? Do you need to talk about it still, or have you moved on? Like, what do you need? It's just
100%. Yeah, because we always compare each other too, and it's almost like I get the impression that a lot of people, they don't want to see each other win because they feel like if you're winning, that means I'm a loser or something like that. Like they compare themselves in that way, which is really counterproductive.
like I'll tell you something. So I went to art school. I have a bachelor's in fine art, and there are a few of my classmates that have literally just taken like their talent and thrived. And I felt like that for a long time. I was like, dang, like they're doing so good, and I don't understand what I'm not doing. That's not going to get me to where they're going. And that just, it would like eat at me almost, like, dang, like, and again, like I'm human, like I'm not Gandhi or anything. And then I realized, I was like, you know what? Like, this is for them. It's not for me. And that doesn't mean that what I'm doing isn't the best version of myself that I can be in the right now. And the best version of myself that I can be is to be their biggest cheerleader and always be there for them and support them and share their stuff, go on social media, do what I need to do. And that's not a reflection of me not being a thriving artist. That's me being a thriving human being and helping someone else excel.
Amen to that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I agree with you. Like, I don't know how many times like I have done a podcast or like I've done something and somebody just like throws in a snarky little comment, and it like it makes me question, like, are you saying that because you're upset that I have had something positive happen, or are you upset with yourself that it didn't happen to you? Like, are you upset with me or are you upset with yourself?
That's a valid question, I think. Yeah,
Yeah.
100%.
As philosophical as it sounds, I mean,
It is.
I wish people would just take like 2 seconds to like look at themselves and be like, what am I doing within my life that is hindering my own self? Maybe not like finances, how you were brought up, how you were raised, those are things you can't control. But as you grow into an individual, like you can actively make choices to change yourself, not your environment, finances. Like, you know, you're hindered to certain things based off of your demographic. But there are things that you can actively choose as an individual to better yourself in the long run, which is like reading a book or going and making friends. Even if it's hard, online friends are still friends. And I think to some people, you know, like they feel like they're stuck, especially right now with like how things are going in society and like money wise and this like possible recession that we may be having and things of that nature. People feel really stuck. But again, everything in life is temporary, including ourselves. And if you can just take 10 seconds to say, you know what, like, what is me fixating on that's going to change?
Yeah.
Can
That's right.
can I fix it in 5 minutes? It's not the worth weeks worth of stress trying to get it done. You know, like if I can, the things that I can fix right now are myself and my attitude, and I'm going to go do something that I enjoy that brings me happiness, that's going to make other people happy to be around me, because my energy is going to push off on other people.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with 100%. I have one more question that's kind of, you haven't really, I don't know if you've addressed this, but I don't think you have. When you died, were you aware or did you sense, feel, hear the people who were still on Earth?
No, I did not. And see, and that's what, like, when I say that I came back and I felt older, was because time is like, I've always heard those TED talks of like time's a paradox. you know,
Mm-hmm.
it's not a linear thing, and that is so true. Like when I had my experience and I came back, I felt so much older, and I almost forgot the people that were back here in this realm,
Wow.
because my soul had aged so much. I felt so tired and old. And when I came back, my friends were all the same age. I felt like I looked much older than them. And of course, when I would look in a mirror, like I didn't recognize the person that I was, because my soul was decades older than what my physical body was. And
Yeah.
there are sometimes I still struggle with that. Like I feel like I feel very old, and then I'll look at myself and I'll go, that doesn't match to me. It doesn't match.
Wow.
So it's just one of those weird things. So no, I didn't think of my family here on Earth, because I felt like, in a selfish way, that I was taking everything that I needed to understand about how to better myself, and I took it wholeheartedly. I'm sure if I asked a question about my family, I would have been gifted that information. But the things that I was fixated on were solely like, what am I doing wrong to make people not, that I want to love me, not make them love me?
Mm-hmm.
That's where my lesson came from, was self-validation and what I needed to better myself
Yeah.
in the long run.
Yeah. It's interesting because I've heard several people who've had experiences talk about how um, when they leave their body, it's like they become completely detached from the earth world,
Yes.
including the people that like their spouses, their children, everything. Not that they don't care about them or don't love them. It's just like a complete detachment. Like,
It It's
yeah.
very, yeah. Like my mom is like my best friend, and I literally call her like maybe 2 times a day. It's kind of a problem. Like we're just really, really close. And my grandfather was like my best friend. I would call him 2 to 3 times a day when I moved away. And it never dawned on me to like to ask about them. It never did, because I was just like in this moment with this, like, I don't want to say entity, but like force is a nice way to think about it. Like I was in this space learning about myself, how to be a better person, and then unfold experiencing everything that I needed to unselfishly, like taking all that information in for myself. So
Yeah, it's like a really, really spiritual therapy session or something.
like I was never spiritual. Like, I mean, I grew up going to church with my family like all the time when I was a kid, and it just never like settled with me. Like I never adopted certain things from it, you know. And then as I got older, I was really interested in religion, like world religion, and I took world religion courses every single semester if I could and it fit in with my like electives. I would take it because I was just always so interested in like other societies and like, well, Christianity doesn't fit with me. Maybe I'll find something that does, you know? And after this experience, it like really pushed me into like pantheism, and it fits so beautifully with my personal mantra, and it just brings me a lot of comfort knowing that I'm doing the best that I can do, which is that I respect every living creature on this planet, whether it's a tree or an animal or a human or a sea creature, whatever it is, it has the same right to be here that I do. I am no better than any other living organism. We are all a part of this beautiful, complex ecosystem together. And I feel like us as a society, we are so fixated on what's going to benefit humans right now, and they don't see the bigger picture. They don't see that like we're all so connected into this beautiful environment, and if we could just take 2 seconds to get that perspective back and look at where we came from and what we're actually doing to be better, I think it would change a lot of people's mindsets about like making money and trying to be the next big thing on like social media or like, you know, whatever it is. I think if we could just take like 2 minutes to realize like where we're actually at and doing in this moment, it would completely change the way that we run as a society in whole.
Yeah. I feel like a lot of times you can narrow down most of our issues to greed and ego.
Yeah.
That's what it
Yeah.
feels like. Yeah.
That's true. That's very true. You know, like I'll never forget this guy. This guy random messaged me and he sent me like this really long Bible verse. Like he sent me this like probably 2 paragraph page Bible verse about homosexuality and how I was gifted this second chance and I came back to squander it by being a homosexual. And I like instantly got so mad. I was like, bro, like you don't know me. Like, yeah, you think you know me because I've done this interview and you've probably seen a few of them. Like, you hunted me down to look at the other ones I've done, like, totally fine. And I was like typing a mile a minute, and then like it just hit me like square in the forehead. And I was like, I erased everything and went back and I said, I think you need to listen to my near-death experience one more time, because what I preached the entire time was loving someone who is different than you and having patience and guidance to do so. And you chose not to take that lesson. And instead you tried to fix me. You need to listen to it again. And I didn't get anything back from him. And I think like a month or two goes by and he messaged me again. And he said, you know, like, it kind of made me mad that you said that because I was wanting a reaction out of you. But then I listened to it again. And you're right. Like, I chose not to listen to the message that you were giving me. And I'm sorry. And I was like, you know, like, that's totally fine. Like, I really appreciate you coming back because, you know, sometimes I get messages and people respond to them and they don't. And, you know, like, I hope you find peace within yourself to be the best version of yourself that you can be every single day. Because right now you are doing exactly what I would hope for you to do, which is to be the best person that you can be right now. Regardless if you agree with my lifestyle or not, you know?
Yeah, no, that's fair. I mean, because there's as many opinions on this earth as there are people. So, yeah, like, so I totally get that. Like, I have to be 100% honest with you. I personally am a Christian,
Yeah.
but I don't condemn people. I don't do that because, I mean, I feel in my perspective that I was forgiven. I was redeemed. So I'm not the judge and I'm not the jury. So I just, like, if somebody asks me my opinion, I'll tell them the truth, but I don't go around condemning other people or their lifestyles or anything, just like I wouldn't want someone doing that to me.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I feel like it's kind of great having this perspective, because a lot of the backlash that I get is from the Christian community. They come to me and say, you know, like, hey, you saw purgatory and this and that, and you need to like repent and do this and live your life right by God and this and that. And like, the only thing that I can think to say to them in the moment is like, I'm glad you found something that works for you, but it's not necessarily a cookie cutter mold that works for everyone else. So having this other perspective coming in, because I've done a lot of near-death experience interviews from, like, I did one from an ICU nurse, and she did bedside death manner, and she like wanted my perspective of how people die and come back. And I've did one with an atheist group, and now having this experience with someone who falls into that Christian sect, maybe this is going to help people understand a little bit better of why other people maybe not choose Christianity as their main form of, like, I don't want to say religion, but like self-comfort, you know, like, because a religion isn't just about like living by a standard. It's a way of having self-comfort, just like how I have self-comfort in knowing that I had this experience, and what I experienced didn't fit into that, like, I don't want to say like Christian cookie cutter mold, but for me, it brought me a lot of comfort knowing that I was loved and validated where I couldn't find it other places. So that makes total sense.
Yeah. And I just want to apologize. I know that you mentioned having like not a great Christian upbringing experience, like a what we call Christians call a church hurt. And so so I've heard you're not the first person who's told me that they've had that experience. I know many people have had that, and I just want to apologize for that, because that doesn't help anybody, you know. So yeah. And I'm glad that you actually are willing to talk to me, especially considering we don't always have the same kind of, you know, world view of things. And that's okay. We can still have like a really cool discussion. I really enjoyed your discussion and all the stuff that you've shared. It's been amazing. You've been so vulnerable and so open, and I really, really appreciate that.
Well, you know, I mean, it's how can I say that I'm only going to limit an experience that I've had because of something that maybe just doesn't fit my exact life standard right now. Like, that's like, why am I going to look at you and compare you to something that happened to me oh my gosh, I'm so old, 20, 30 years ago. You know what I mean? Like, why would I look at you and generalize you into a group that came from in the 90s, a different mindset and a completely different demographic? You know, like, people are allowed to grow and change and develop. And if you can't, that's one thing. But if you actively choose not to, you are just taking whatever fear that you have and you're hanging on to it. You know, like, people that come to me and say, well, you're going to hell because you're gay, you know, like, that's a sin. And I'll say, you know, I appreciate your concern. I really do. I know that comes from a place of love and fear for me and my well-being. But I want to let you know that I personally know I'm going to be okay. Like, I've got like a side back door. I'm fine. And, you know, like, I will send people if I get messages like that, I'll send them a few of the videos that I've done and say, you know, like, I think there's a lot, and as I go to this comment and read this comment on this page, or I'll screenshot it and send it to them. I was like, you're not only leaving comments for myself to read, but maybe someone who is gay or questioning, or, my God, like, what if they're 80 years old and they've never had the opportunity to come out and be who they authentically want to be, because they first come to the comment section and they read what you have said, and it hinders their life ability, and they don't get to be truly who they want to be because of the fear that you're enlisting in them. Like, that's not what society is all about. Like, we want to nurture people into being who they want to be. And if you can just look at my perspective of how I was raised and shown things through the church hurt I've never heard that, so I'm gonna start using that. Thank you. But, you know, I have learned that there are a lot more, I don't want to say Christians, but there are a lot more like God-loving people like you than there are God-fearing people that I grew up with. And you coming forward and saying, like, hey, I'm sorry you experienced that, like, that's a beautiful thing. And I really appreciate that. And I know you're not apologizing for yourself, but for others, and it's validated. So thank you. I appreciate that.
Oh, I'm happy. I'm happy that you accepted my apology or the apology. Yeah.
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 It's not even like an acceptance of an apology. It's that, like you're seeing something that was done wrong, even though if it wasn't by you, and you're acknowledging that for myself, but also for other people. Like
Mhm.
if anyone else is watching this, or if it's live or going to be recorded and put somewhere, like this conversation is going to be shown to other people. And just a gay woman and a Christian woman have found a happy medium in the middle, that I accept you and you accept me. And that is the change that I think people need to see.
Mhm.
Everything that I just talked about, like loving each other and accepting each other, regardless if it fits your exact lifestyle right now, like you and I are living up to that 100%. And I hope that it brings a shine of light necessarily into people that may be having reservations about having that type of relationship with others.
100%. And I think that's the thing. Like, we need to see that it's okay to have relationships with people who are not like ourselves, right? It's totally great, actually. It enriches our lives.
Very true.
Yeah. I just want to thank you so much again, Rachel, for coming on here. I don't want to take up too much of your time or disrespect your time. I'm so appreciative of, again, you being vulnerable and opening up and sharing everything you did.
Yeah.
And why don't you tell everyone your TikTok handle?
Oh my gosh.
I'll put it in the description too.
Yeah. You guys can find me on Instagram at Rachel the Doodler, or you can find me on TikTok. And I don't even remember my TikTok handle because it's crazy on there all the time. Looks like I changed it right now. So it's Ray Demp. RayRaydemp. Yeah.
Cool. So I'll make sure that I post that in the description as well.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
I appreciate everything, and I hope you have a great day, great weekend.
You too.
And thanks again.
Yeah, thanks for anyone who's watching, and I hope that this brings someone out there a little bit of comfort and a little bit of peace, at least somewhere.
I agree. Thanks
Thank
again.
you.
Bye, Rachel.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you have had an NDE that you would like to share, please email us at travelsinthespirit@gmail.com. Until next time, God bless.